Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 13. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to Gus Clemens, who writes a syndicated weekly wine column that's published in more than 100 Texas newspapers that are part of the Gannett Company, the largest newspaper chain in the U.S. that also owns USA Today. Quote, "Wonderful to listen to, informative, funny. I agreed with almost everything you said in your podcast, and I've made many of the same observations in my column over the years. I don't score wines for the reasons you mentioned. My writing is about wine and the wine world. My tasting notes focus much more on the wine's story or the story of the grape or the region or all of the above." End quote. Thank you, Gus. This is so kind and so collegial of you to say. And just FYI, he's referring to last week's podcast on wine scores. Are they misleading or helpful to you as a consumer? So you can go back and listen to that one if you missed it. And be sure to check out Gus's column online in any of those newspapers or at gusclemensonwine.com. I'll continue to give a shout out to others who've been kind enough to leave a review on Apple or elsewhere on social. So if you want me to mention your website or your social media handle, please include that in your review along with your name. Now, back to this episode. We're chatting with Charles Back, owner and winemaker of both the whimsical Goats de Rome label as well as the premium brand Fairview. Charles is up there in my pantheon of great winemakers who are also incredibly witty and wise. He's South Africa's answer to California's Randall Graham of Bonnie Doon. I know you're going to love our conversation. You may be familiar with this label. It's extremely popular, but there is a fascinating backstory behind it. Goats de Rome. Does it sound like a familiar French region? I'm sure that's just coincidence. Our guest has wonderful stories to tell about this, but also about what's happening with South African wine, some interesting developments, things that are actually going to surprise you. So our guest produces some of South Africa's most coveted premium wines under the labels of Fairview Estate, a third-generation family-owned farm located on the slopes of Paarl Mountain in the winelands of the Western Cape of South Africa, with a winemaking heritage that dates back to 1693. He also founded one of the most successful Black empowerment labels, Fair Valley. However, you may be more familiar with his more playful line of wines, Goats de Rome and the Goat Father, among others, a brand which went on to become the highest-selling South American wine brand in the United States following its introduction in 2000. He is known as one of the great entrepreneurs and innovators in the wine world. In 2017, he became one of the most awarded winemakers in South Africa, honored with prestigious titles such as the 1659 Wine Industry Medal of Honor, 2017, and the South African Wine Farmer of the Year. He joins me now live from his winery in Paarl, South Africa. Welcome, Charles Back. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you.
You have got so many interesting stories, but I think the label people know best, perhaps, is your Goats de Rome. There's Goats de Rome, white and red. There's Goat Father. Now, Goats de Rome and Goat Rôti, is it coincidence that they just happen to sound like a French wine region we know?
That's absolute coincidence. It started at Fairview. We have a goat tower where the highest producing goats of the week have a free weekend in the goat tower. It's a spiral staircase that runs up. And one day, my mischievous son opened the gate of the goat tower, and the goats ran into the vineyard. And it's the most dangerous thing to have goats marauding through vineyards because you can imagine the devastation they can cause. Our goats were quite specific about what they wanted, and we watched them going through the vineyards, and they had some Shiraz, and they missed out the Merlot. Then they went to Carignan and missed out the Cabernet, and then they went to Cinsault. And we picked up a pattern as they went along, and they were very specific. And I've watched this, and I got to the winemaker and I said, just do me a favor, send the laboratory technician out with a clipboard and let her take notes of what the goats are eating and roughly how much they're consuming. And then we brought the goat blend back to the laboratory and constructed the blend according to their specific taste. It was amazing wine, and we came up with this wine, and we didn't know what to call it. We thought, well, the goats are roaming through the vineyard. Let's call it Goats to Roam. And we couldn't understand all the complications that followed after that.
So it's very scientific. You were recording what the goats ate, the percentage of different grapes from traditional Rhone Valley grapes, but that's coincidental as well. And that made up the blend. That's how you decided how to blend this wine.
Exactly right. And then what happened, it wasn't my doing. Somebody slipped in a bottle of Goats to Rome. I think it was Goat Roti or Goats to Rome, in a lineup in the English wine magazine, the tasting of Rhone wines.
Oh.
And unfortunately, I think it was Goat Roti came out very close to the top. And it beat a number of very, very serious Rhone producers. And that started the whole furore. And people were very upset about that. Understandably so. If I was a Rhone producer, I would have done the same. And that's when we ran into trouble with Goats to Rhone.
It seems like, not to make a pun, but yes, I will, you like to butt heads with French authorities because they try to sue you for trademark infringement. What happened then?
It was a catastrophe as far as I was concerned, because at that stage we just got Goats to Rome into America, and it was the first South African wine to find a foothold in America, and it started growing quite rapidly. And then we had this whole trademark infringement case going on. We actually made history in South Africa. It was the first protest march, I think, in our political past, where a landowner, a white vineyard owner, and all the workers teamed up together, and we had a protest march to the French embassy in Cape Town. And it caught attention of a lot of international press. In fact, CNN covered it, and it went global. We all dressed up in these masks.
Yes, the goat mask. Yeah.
Yes, we put it on our heads, and we all went up, and we went to the
French embassy. Yes.
Yes, the French embassy.
How on earth did CNN hear about this, I wonder? Was it just coincidence?
One of our goats whispered in their ear. I don't know how they got to.
That's great.
You know, when the farmers have a altercation in France, what they normally do, they drive into Paris with big truckloads of manure and dump it on the Champs-Élysées. So I thought, being African, we're going to be a bit more sophisticated than that. And I vacuum packed some goat droppings to take to the ambassador because they've got beautiful gardens. And I thought they could be fertilized with some perfect goat droppings. And I presented to him with a beautiful brie that we make at Fairview, and obviously a magnum of Goats to Rome. And it all ended in a good spirit, and they stopped pursuing the trademark infringement. And today I own the trademark Goats to Rome.
That is fabulous. And did the publicity help at all with all this controversy?
I think that's the reason why they stopped. I wish they carried on, because I subsequently registered Goat Roti, which is a roasted goat. So you had, and then we also had Bordeaux. A doe is a female goat, so she's very bored because she's only permitted to grow 5 varieties of grape, which is terrible. So we had Bordeaux, and then we went into Italian blend called the Goat Father.
Yes, I have that one here.
Exactly. There's a resemblance apparently between myself and that goat. We had a lot of fun doing it, I must be honest.
Absolutely. Well, whatever I can do to stir up the controversy again, because it generated so much great publicity, we'll try to do that for you. I just love those stories. Do you have a bearded elder there? Is there one primary goat in residence, if you will?
Every now and then we have to select a special goat that lives in the goat tower. And the criteria, they must have massive horns, and he must have an imposing beard, and he mustn't be afraid of public and public speaking. Every now and then, obviously, as time moves on, goats move on as well, like we all do. And the challenge is to find a replacement as time moves on. So the goat has been there since for the 40 years that the tower has existed, yes.
I know when I was there and I asked your chief goat herder, "Oh, what's the name of this goat?" He said, "We don't name them. They go on to greener pastures."
We're now on billing number 17, so that's where we
Okay,
are.
great. How much of your goat wine do you export? The goat brand, if you will.
I've been trying desperately to shed the goat over time because that's a humorous end of our winemaking and where we have a lot of fun. Having said that, most of our work is at the serious end. And every time I think I want to slaughter this goat and it pops up in a different part of the world, it ran in the States, it's running in Canada at the moment. I think in Norway, it's the number one selling South African wine at the moment. And it does well in Japan and it does well in Russia. So we find it popping up all over the show. While it's doing that, we put the best product in the bottle we possibly can because if you're using so much humor, you have to counterpoint it with real quality. Otherwise, it's not going to stick around as long as it has.
And I've heard no matter what's on the label, whether it's a bit of a play on words, the first sale perhaps is based on the label, the second sale is based on the product that's in there. And I must say, that the price point and value and quality of taste of these wines is superb. I mean, no wonder they're the number one brand of South African wine since their launch here. I mean, it's so memorable, but it's really decent quality for the price points.
When you do something as playful as that, you have to really work much harder on the quality of the product.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
dead in the water. And we just actually produced a new one. This is I think, a 3 liter bag in the box. I redesigned the bag in the box. It looks like a Gucci bag. Okay.
A Gochi bag?
A Gucci bag, even with a gold clasp on the back.
So
And
to get the wine out of it, do you sort of milk it or do you
No,
squeeze
no,
it?
no, no.
No.
It's free flowing. You don't have to go there. I've done all the hard work for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And it's got a tap on it, and this is the best way of enjoying goat's Rome in Africa for sure.
Do you know if that's available in other countries?
No, it's something that we just do domestically,
Okay,
and we spent a lot of time in designing this bag. We would like to get it into other parts of the world quite soon.
that'd be great. Very fashionable. So, were these labels at all designed with the critter craze in mind back when that was happening from penguins to kangaroos?
I think it was the beginning of the critter craze. We had no idea that we wanted to do a critter craze label. If you look at our goat, it's very stylized. It doesn't look like a furry, fuzzy little animal. It's got a lot of sort of status and presence, and is quite aggressive on the packaging. So it's not a furry, fuzzy, soft sort of animal feel about it. It's got status, and it wasn't intended to be a critter label. It was really intended to be a serious label for a serious wine.
Interesting. Okay. I absolutely love your sense of humor, but do you think there's ever any danger of not being taken seriously as a winemaker and wines?
Yeah, a big risk. It put a lot of pressure on us as a company, having something as frivolous as that, and at the same time making handcrafted wines on the other end. There has been tension in the brand for sure. So the goats have been fabulous for us to create awareness for South Africa as a wine producing country. But at the same time, it's been a challenge for us to manage the success of goats whilst trying to build the top end of our portfolio.
Right. So before we move off all things critter, in North America, the predators tend to be deer or starlings who love to eat those grapes around harvest time, which is right now for us. You have a unique predator, though, over there. What is that?
We've got lots of predators there. So it starts with the lions, and you can go all the way
Oh,
elephants
wow.
if you really want trouble. No, in the Cape, unfortunately, the only real challenge we have in our vineyard are very small indigenous antelope, which love the fresh shoots of newly planted vineyards. That's a challenge. Other than that, we don't have a lot of problems with that. We have an indigenous wild guinea fowl that roams the vineyards as well, and that actually helps us eat up all the things that could be dangerous for vineyards, all the dangerous, harmful insects. So the critters are against us, but we've got a lot of critters that work with us.
So you also make cheese. Why do you make cheese? Why didn't you just stick to wine?
The main reason for that, I also have to make a living, and it's very difficult to make. It's very difficult to make a living out of producing wine. It feeds my passion. Wine is my passion. But many, many years ago, my late father went and my mother went to a trip to the Rhone Valley, and they, for the first time, experienced artisanal cheese, goat's milk cheese, and came back with this idea, which I thought was absolutely ludicrous. And my dad started by importing a little herd of Swiss milk goats. And as soon as we started making cheese, I got a hospital pass and I was handed the cheese portfolio as well. So I made cheese in the morning from 4 till 6, and then from 6 on, I used to do wine. That's how the cheese business started. And today we South Africa's largest producer of specialty cheese.
Wow, how much cheese do you produce?
I do about 250 tons of cheese a month, in the good months, and normally from 200 to 250 tons. And it's all artisanal produced cheeses, Camembert, Brie, and a whole range of blues. But it's a very nice industry to be in alongside wine, because if you take cheese from a technological point of view, it's about a decade ahead of wine. But if you take wine, it's about a decade ahead of cheese in the sense of marketing and brand development. So there's a nice synergy between the two products, and we can use them together as they play off each other in the marketing perspective as well.
And how many goats do you have in the herd?
At the moment, not enough, because goat milk only makes up about 0.5% of our total production. Most of it is Jersey cows, which I think you have in Canada as well, with a high butter fat and protein. We have about 500 goats. I'm hoping to step it up to 2,000 goats in milk in the next couple of years.
There's going to be a lot of competition for that tower.
Yes. I might have to add a floor or two
The little goat elevator.
for the lazy ones.
It must be different though. Making wine, sort of, it comes around once a year. You make all the important decisions, you get one chance. But making cheese, that's got to be a bit more do, correct, move on. It's a shorter timeline, right?
Just to come back to wine, really is not made in the cellar. Wine's made in the vineyard. So we would spend the entire year grooming the vineyards in sync with the type of product we would require from the vineyard. But harvest is the end of the road as far as winemaking is concerned. Cheese making, every day, tomorrow morning, within a couple of hours, our trucks would roll in with all the milk. And it's a more exact science. And it's more following a specific recipe and sticking to that without deviation. Where winemaking, you got a bit more scope for movement, and you can be more innovative, and you can try things, and you can always blend them away or fix up, or this wine can add some value to another blend. Whereas cheese making, you make a mistake, you made a mistake, and that's the end of the road.
Interesting. One of the cheeses that I tasted there that was a favorite, I don't know if you have it in front of you. I think you called it a Parmesan, and it was a play on Parmesan. It was so cute. And then I turned around the back of the package, and there was this goat nibbling its way across the barcode, eating it down like grass. Don't know if you still have that one, but
there was a little subtle twist to that grass. There's one of my opposition companies in South Africa have a logo similar to a flower, and flower was in amongst that grass, and the goat was on the way to hoover that as well. Unfortunately, don't have that product with me at the moment, but I got something here which I think it's chili and caramel swirl in the middle of a goat's milk cheese. On the back, now that marijuana has been legalized, we roll it in marijuana, and then we have the chili. Now I'm pulling your leg, not true.
Okay.
It's coriander.
I'm such a gullible journalist. Anyway.
It's coriander on the outside, okay, and then a swirl of chili and caramel on the inside. So we're doing a whole host of these type of cheeses at the moment. And then we also reinvented cheddar.
Yes.
And bobotie is an indigenous South African flavor that they add to food. And we infuse the cheddar with that. And then a brie that we just launched it in a very traditional style. We got two ranges of brie. One we call ripe and ready, and the traditional one that we all know in all over the world, the same style.
Do you export your cheeses?
Unfortunately, we do not have enough cheese at the moment to cope with the domestic market, and the logistics of exporting cheese is very difficult. However, we do export on the odd occasion to enter international competitions, and I have exported to America at Wisconsin. I came second in the blue cheese category, and then I exported to London for the World Cheese Awards. We were very fortunate. For 3 years in a row, we won the best Camembert Brie in the world.
Wow, you are just knocking it over all around. I am told a component of fish is in the wine.
If you find the wine or stabilized wine, French used to use it in
yes.
Bordeaux, egg white,
Fish
which is
bladder,
protein, and then you got fish protein, isinglass. They use that, but we don't do that at all. We don't use any fining agent, completely natural.
Okay, yes. I was thinking he was talking about the cheese. I'm thinking there's fish in cheese, but it's in the wine. Fish bladder, isinglass, yeah.
Very fishy cheese, if that's the case, I must say.
Yeah. So let's turn to your more serious wines, but also a more serious subject now, Charles. As a little summary, in the late 1980s, 23 countries, including Canada, the US, and the UK, imposed economic sanctions on South Africa to protest apartheid, which literally means separateness, the racial segregation of blacks and whites. What impact do you think apartheid had on the wine industry?
I think it was a devastating impact. I think South African wine, particularly South African brandy, was the number one selling brandy in your country. So immediately that was cut. And I completely agreed with the sanctions imposed upon South Africa. It did help force and facilitate a much needed change. It had a catastrophic economical impact on the wine industry, and it stagnated most probably for the period that sanctions were imposed in South Africa.
Wow. With the wine industry, the specific impacts, I can only imagine that your winemakers weren't getting experience around the world. Technology was probably stifled, investment. I read somewhere where you couldn't even test new vine stock. Chardonnay was illegal in the country. So then, summarizing very quickly, in 1990, President Frederick de Klerk began negotiations to end apartheid and freed Nelson Mandela, who had spent 27 years in prison. They say it was like the knocking down of the Berlin Wall. So, what happened for the wine industry after apartheid?
Just to come back to the apartheid era, there was only one good thing that ever came out of that period, was that winemakers were forced to deal with a very limited market. So you only had a domestic market, and there was fierce competition to find a little bit of sunshine in the domestic market. And it forced us to be very innovative because you had to optimize every opportunity you had. So we competed fiercely with each other. And that was the birth of the South African wine tourism industry. Everybody developed cellar doors. Every opportunity you could sell wine, you had to make the best of it. That's why South Africa today most probably is the most evolved, the developed cellar door experience in the wine world because of that. So that was the only benefit. But post-apartheid, the floodgates opened, and for a very short period of time, with the flavor of the month globally. And I do remember the day when Mandela was released. It was a very emotional day for all of us. And the national road to Cape Town runs through the bottom part of Fairview. And I remember going right down to the bottom part of the farm, standing up against the fence and watching the cavalcade go past, because he was incarcerated first in Robben Island and then in a local prison quite near us. In fact, a couple of kilometers from where I'm sitting now. And I saw the cavalcade past the N1 on the national road. And I saw the whole cavalcade on the way to Cape. And I realized with that, South Africa's life and my life had changed. It was an amazing opportunity that we had.
That's fabulous. What a great story. And the other thing about apartheid, if anything, did it also kind of force South African winemakers to develop their own style, not to go with that sort of homogenous international style that was happening in the 90s with Chile and California and so on? You didn't have access to that market, so you had to hunker down and develop your own styles of wine too.
I think our styles of wine were out of sync with what the international market required. In fact, I think I was one of the first ones to get in the fruit forward style of the whole bunch in South Africa, because I realized we had to. But South Africa has got a very unique position in the global wine business. We're not as upfront as the new world would be, like, let's say, Chile or California, Australia to a similar degree. And we're not as restrained and focused as the old world would be. We naturally gravitated somewhere in the middle. And that's where our natural style lies. So, yes, we did develop it at home, but I think we weren't completely in touch. Our wines were a little bit astringent, a bit tannic, and the tannins were very dry, and the mid palate was a little bit patchy. So that was our challenge we had with our wines when we re-entered the international market.
Wow. So today, how many wineries are owned by Blacks in South Africa? Do you have any notion of what the percentage is?
Black ownership is a priority in our country.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, to evolve from a white dominated society and business society to one that reflects our diversity, the ones that do the best first are the things that generate the most cash. So you would find banking, commerce, mining. The black empowerment process has progressed a lot further there than in agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most difficult ones to do, because I've been here for 3 generations. We're still struggling. So it's going to be very difficult to transform agriculture. There are black-owned farms. I do not know how many there are, and I think there need to be more.
Mm-hmm.
The people buying wine farms in South Africa today are people that made a lot of money in some other industry, and they're buying a farm to lose their fortune. And I don't think that's what empowerment or changing our economic reality for the majority of South Africans is going to be about,
Yes.
unfortunately.
I've read that less than 1% are Black owned, but that there are initiatives, including projects that you're doing. Tell us about Fair Valley, because that goes right to the heart of this issue.
When I started farming, which is now 40 years ago, after about a decade of farming, I realized that our society on farms are very paternalistic. We always think what's good for other people around us. And I thought that's not the way to move forward. So I got a research institute in. And at that stage, I only had 57 workers working with me. Today, I've got 600. And we started with 57 workers in a completely independent interview with each one of them to establish what their requirements might be moving forward. They're the five same things that all of us require. First, a good salary. Secondly, a good home, good education for the children, good medical, and a good pension. So exactly the same requirements that everybody has, farm workers have those. So I addressed those issues. And land ownership didn't come up. I think there was one person that said he wouldn't mind farming. So I didn't focus on the farming aspect. I focused on those five other aspects. Having said that, when the opportunity arose just after Mandela was released, Black people or people of color could acquire land. We were the first people to do that. And we bought a piece of adjacent land and started the Fair Valley Farm Workers Association with the sole intent of people owning their own homes over time. And it's a process that we're still busy with.
Wow. How many people are involved in that?
There are 57 members. To date, we've been able to house only 9 of them there because there have been constraints for rezoning has been a problem. So we hit a lot of red tape there as well. But on my other properties where it was easy to find adjacent townships or places where the subdivisions have already been taken place, it has been relatively easy at my Spicewood winery, which is about 40 minutes away from Paarl in a little town called Malmesbury. All the farm workers own their own houses. Now, the challenge on a farm in South Africa, if you have a house on a farm, it remains a house. But if you have your own house on your own piece of land, you can turn it into a home. And that has liberated the people unbelievably. And my whole drive moving forward the next couple of years, that everybody that works with me should have their own home.
Wow. And of course, when it's one employee, that represents a whole family.
The six dependents at least.
Yes, exactly, who are thriving based on that one job. That's pretty amazing.
The other challenge in South Africa is that our unemployment is close to 30%. So other than other new world wine countries, making wine in South Africa has an extra dimension to it. You can use your success in wine or success in your brand to make a profound impact on a whole lot of other people's lives around you, which you don't enjoy in other parts of new world wine countries.
And how many cases approximately does Fair Valley produce now?
I think that goes between 12 and 18,000 cases a year, depending on the demand around the world. It's a very difficult concept. And you do not want to sell the wine on the basis that it's an empowerment project. You must sell the wine on the value that the wine presents at the price point.
Right, because we also see fair trade on labels. Is that just, in your mind, a bonus?
I think fair trade is a very important accreditation. All my products are fair trade produced. We don't always put the accreditation on the label depending on the market. But if a consumer buys a fair trade bottle of wine, they can be rest assured it's a very stringent and a very tough accreditation to attain, and it's very well managed. And if you buy a bottle of fair trade wine, you'll know that everyone in the value chain that's been properly looked after, and there's nothing that is undesirable.
So it's about worker rights mostly?
It's workers' rights, environmental factors, a whole
Okay.
host of hurdles you have to get over. And then on top of there's a joint body, and a certain percentage of the income from that wine falls into the joint body, which is managed by farm workers, and they can do projects with that social upliftment, education, buying kids' uniforms, and they can use it to their own discretion, and the farmer has no input in that whatsoever.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about your Fairview estate, because this is your premium wine, if I understand it correctly.
Well, it's my home base, my family farm. The farm was first settled by European settlers in 1693. But one must be very careful. That's not the first time people lived at Fairview. The Khoisan, the indigenous tribe of people, collectively called Bushmen, went through this area, and they were hunter-gatherers. So there were no formal settlements, but there were indigenous people in the area. But the first Europeans settled in 1693. The first wine was made in 1699, which is quite a long time, which makes South Africa the oldest New World wine producing country, or the newest Old World producing country. My late grandfather was a Lithuanian immigrant, and he bought the farm in 1937. My father took over, and I've been here for 40 years. So that's the history of Fairview in a nutshell.
Wow. I think you've summed this up before. It sounds like...
Well, if you do something for 40 years, you can't work it out, then there's something wrong.
That's great.
I should go milk goats.
Well, maybe you can bring in a goat for the next interview or something.
It'll do better than I do, I promise you.
You are doing just fine. This is great. But I like the way you put it, the newest old world country or the oldest new world country. I love that sort of mix, that blend because of the history. I think it might surprise people that I believe, maybe my stats are out of date, but 3/4 or something like that is still white wine. We think of South African as a red wine production country, but is it mostly white still?
I think it's swing 60-40. I think not as high as that. I think the last 25 years, there's been more red planted than white. But traditionally, with our climate, a much warmer climate, Mediterranean climate, I think white wine was the preferred drink up until about 20 years ago. I think today it's probably 60-40 red and white.
And do you think that's the future for South Africa, that as a country you should be focused on the red wines?
South Africa is a very interesting country when it comes to viticultural resources. It's a very complex. You've been here. There are a lot of towering mountain ranges, a lot of small valleys, two big oceans, major oceans meeting, and a lot of different elevations. So you've got a whole palette as a winemaker to produce a whole range of wine. That's our challenge. Not unlike parts of Chile or Argentina, Australia, where you've got vast tracts of homogeneous soil producing fantastic Chardonnay from the bottom to the top, or Merlot from the bottom to the top. We've got a lot of complexities in our topography and our terroir, which makes us a very difficult country to understand, even for us, believe me. You've got a whole host of different styles coming from this country.
I'm fascinated personally with Chenin Blanc, which is also called Steen. Why is that so iconic in South Africa? What is it like? I'm so drawn to that wine from South Africa.
I think in South Africa, under conditions, the adaptability of the variety, you can get beautiful Chenin Blancs grown in cool climate areas with a lovely edge of minerality to it. And then you get them very tropical up front with like guava flavors. And then the new young winemakers have really taken it to the next level, where they've let skin ferment and they put it in oak and they leave it silly, and you get this complex wine. So I think it's a real workhorse of the industry and produces a whole wide range of fantastic wines at the moment.
So, not that this talk has been dry by any means, but I keep putting this off, but I don't want to run out of time. I want to taste the wines that I have here. Let's start with the Goats du Rhône white. And this is a blend, I would assume, of traditional Rhône varieties. Maybe you can describe that one.
I think it's a very modern rendition of a Rhône white, technically well made, I would assume. And it's a Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, and Viognier blend. We use the Grenache Blanc to give the acidity and the backbone, freshness, the Viognier to have the nice tropical notes on the nose, and the Roussanne to give a beautiful mid-palate and flesh it out in complexity.
That is lovely. So floral, but not over the top.
We try and restrain our style. It's so easy in South Africa to make very blousy, big, bold wines and homogenize the whole style. And we try and get personality and texture into each one that we do.
This is lovely. So floral and so delicate, yet nicely balanced. Good acidity, great for seafood. So nice. Okay, so let us do the other goat wines here. Goats du Rhône, your goatchi bag.
I'm going to have my goatchi bag.
That's great. And the blend or the percentage of grapes changes each year, I'm sure, but it's...
Depending on the vintage, but it's goat inspired. And the last couple of years, we planted quite a lot of Grenache, which is doing exceptionally well under Cape conditions. So we're lifting the percentage of Grenache as the vintages go on, introduce a bit more lightness, freshness, and a bit more softer fruit on the palate. And we reduced over the years the influence of oak on it.
Ah, yes.
We prefer this style.
I love it. I mean, really, for this price point, it's amazing.
Well, it must be amazing because I lose money on it. So
Now there's a tagline. It's great wine because we lose money on every bottle. Excellent. It's gorgeous. It's like plum, rich, fleshy plums. No heavy oak. Good, vibrant acidity. Wets your palate. Juicy. All right, the Goat Father. I love this. So are we on to Italian varieties?
Italian varieties.
A wild guess, yes.
Yeah. Our goats were under such stress with the French assault that they had to call on a distant cousin from Sicily. And he was the goat father, and he protects the herd at the moment.
Oh, nice. And does this pair well with a smoldering Sicilian bride?
That would do exactly that. And it's a blend of Sangiovese, I think Cab Merlot, if I stand corrected.
Very zesty on the nose. Lots of dark fruit. Smells like pasta to me. A pairing. Very easy drinking again. Full body, but very sort of supple, smooth. Nice blend.
We've spent a lot of time in the vineyard to flesh out the mid palate of our wine and make sure we have tannins that are powdery. That's been the focus. And we also have, funny enough, in our winemaking team, we're 7 people in the team, half of which are ladies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the influence of the ladies of the last couple of years are evident in our wine. They're far more refined and delicate and more interesting, I would like to believe.
Okay. So those are the 3 goat wines that I have. So I wish I had Bordeaux. That's that deer in front of it, like a Bordeaux-looking chateau or turret.
Yes, there are a lot of Bordeaux labels that copied that one. That's where you find the similarities.
I love that. Anyway, okay. I have a Chenin Blanc from Fairview. Is this old
That's it.
vines?
That is right from where I'm sitting, just across the road. It's a fruit from Paarl, and Chenin Blanc is ideally suited to Paarl. That's quite a rich style. We've got 2 Chenin Blancs, one from a cooler region, and this is a more full-bodied, fatter style, richer style.
Does Chenin Blanc go through a dumb stage?
Like the stage I'm in for the last 40 years.
I'm not implying anything. You're so sensitive. You're like Pinot Noir as a grape.
Look, it depends what style. If you make a style like this, the rich, fuller style, it does benefit from bottle aging, but I wouldn't keep it in the bottle for too long. 3-4 years, I think that's where it should be.
Okay. So not benefiting from a lot of aging. This is lovely.
No, upfront fruit and 2 years in the bottle, I think 2 to 3 years is that where you should be on that style.
Very zesty, very vibrant, lemongrass. What do you think is a great pairing for Chenin Blanc, your Chenin Blanc?
Nice ciabatta and cheese on the cheese board, perfect.
Very nice. Very, very nice. All right. Should we do the Primo Pinotage or the Grenache next?
How brave are you? I think let's go big. Are we going to do them both? Or...
Yes, we're going to do them both, yes.
Then I think start with the Grenache.
All right. This is very sleek. I was nipping into it earlier, and it's beautiful. So let me come back to this Grenache. You were saying you're trying to fill out the mid palate with more Grenache. What does Grenache do for a wine? Is it a fat, succulent wine, or?
I call it the poor man's Pinot Noir.
Okay.
It's got similar characteristics as Pinot Noir. It's also the poor winemaker's Pinot Noir because it's adapted to warm growing conditions, and you get fantastic soft fruit, plush fruit on it, and a nice texture and smooth, silky finish to it. I really love this variety to introduce fruit to blends and soften blends at the same time, and it's nice on its own.
Beautiful, beautiful. Again, fleshy, ripe plums, so good, and yet mouth-watering. Ah, my goodness. I'm going to keep motoring only because of the time. I can't believe how fast this has gone because I still want to taste your Pinotage. Pinotage is a cross between Pinot Noir and Cinsault?
Correct. And in South Africa, Cinsault used to be called Hermitage, and that's where the name came from, Pinot and Hermitage.
Ah, gotcha. Why is this such an iconic wine or grape for South Africa, the Pinotage?
There's a label. You've got the label in front of you?
Yeah, I do.
That's my pickup on the front label. That's my registration number of my vehicle. A lot of people ask me why have I got my pickup on the front label. The reason why I've got it, this Pinotage is my best Pinotage, and to find those blocks, you really need that 4x4 to get to where we find these grapes. So we go all over the winelands to find the best Pinotage to put into this product. Pinotage is ideally suited to South African conditions. And the challenge with Pinotage right in the beginning, when we started exporting wines to the rest of the world, was the tannin profile wasn't right. It was like rusty nails and very tannic. But the winemakers got to grips with it, and we got new planting material. And today, the generation of Pinotages out there, coupled with the winemakers, the younger winemakers, the wines are fabulous. And it could be as good as any great Burgundy and has the potential to age. It's sort of a cross between Burgundy and the Rhone in a kind of strange way.
Early and nasty Pinotages that I've had a reputation for smelling like rubber. Why was that?
I think the old Pinotage vineyards were virus infected,
Ah.
and they were the last to be replanted, and the new ones are all virus free. And
Mm.
winemakers now to express the fruit today.
It's beautiful. There's not a hint of that. It's a very elegant wine. It leans toward full body, but it's very elegant. Like you say, with a cross between Pinot Noir and Rhone. I can see that. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I haven't got to the other 56 questions I was going to ask you, Charles, but is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention now?
I just think the most important thing is that South Africa is an amazing country, got amazing human resources, got fabulous people, and the diversity of people and the diversity of wines and the diversity of opportunities we have here is mind-boggling. And if I had my life over, I'm so pleased my grandfather made the voyage to this part of the world. And I'm very pleased to have made a very small contribution to my country. And I hope to do more of that in the future. And I'd love all of you to come visit our country. We've got so much to offer. And we've got so many things that we can share with you. I would love to share with you.
Beautiful. It is a gorgeous country to visit, and yours is especially a lovely winery to visit. I love the tasting rooms, from the spittoons that are actually milking pails to every single touch. You've thought about it all. It's a wonderful place to visit. Thank you, Charles. I so appreciate you spending your time with us. So I've got to let you go so that you get a little bit of sleep before you have to get up and milk those goats.
It was great drinking wine this time of the day. You started a new trend.
Okay, good. I really appreciate you joining us on this sort of time zone. So, Charles, thank you again. And we're all looking forward to trying more of your wines as they come out in our local liquor stores. Great stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All
Bye.
right. Take care. Bye bye. Wasn't he great? Here are my takeaways from this discussion. Number 1. Love Charles's observation that cheese is 10 years ahead of wine in marketing, and yet wine is 10 years ahead of cheese in technology. He cross-pollinates from both sectors to strengthen his market approach and innovation. 2. I also thought it was enlightening to consider the vastly different timelines for making wine and cheese, with cheese being several months compared to once a year for wine. Cheese has satisfied his impatience and cash flow needs, while wine fulfills his long-term life legacy. 3. The Goats label was a great market entry brand into North America, but almost too much so in that he then had to work hard at being taken seriously as a premium winemaker for his Fairview wines. 4. Chenin Blanc is so adaptive to wherever it grows. You must give South African Chenin Blanc a try soon if you haven't tasted this lovely wine. 5. Fair trade has improved the lives of wine and farm employees, but it's not the leading marketing selling point for any wine with that endorsement on the label. Quality still has to lead. 6. His take on apartheid's impact on the South African wine industry was nuanced, including the fact that even though it was devastating, it did help to foster domestic competition and tourism. And 7, he characterizes South African wines as a mid-Atlantic style, with more fruit than European wines, but more restraint than North American wines. I love this. From Charles Back, he calls South Africa the oldest New World country or the newest Old World country. Take your pick. So what was your favorite tip or quote from this episode? Please share that with me on Twitter or Facebook. You can find me at Natalie McLean. On Instagram, I'm at Natalie McLean Wine. Or use the hashtag Unreserved Wine Talk. You'll find reviews for all of the wines we discussed in this episode, links to Charles and the winery's social media channels, plus bonus tips at nataliemclean.com/13. That's where you'll find the show notes. Now, my next guest on the show will be Leslie Brown with the Canadian Association of Sommeliers. We're going to get her best tips on how to choose a wine from a restaurant list and what to ask the sommelier when you're stuck. Finally, if you want to improve your ability to pair wine and food, Join me in a free online video class at nataliemclean.com/class. If you like this episode, you can share it easily with a friend, and I'd really appreciate it if you would. Just tap on the purple box that says Unreserved Wine Talk, and in the bottom right-hand corner of your phone, you're going to see 3 dots. Click on them, and there's your option to share it. It'll fill in everything for you, including the title of this episode and the link to it in an email or text to the wine-loving friend of your choice. Thank you. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.